They rampaged through England, forging their name in history and in legend.
But were they just merciless pillagers, or should we be thanking them for their contribution to our history?
Today we're taking you back to when Nottinghamshire was ruled by Vikings. Today we're starting out in Sherwood Forest because, as the tales go, this land was known for its connection to our rebellious outlaw Robin Hood and his band of merry men. But Martyn, centuries before that, this land was occupied by another band of folk, is that right?
That's true. Sherwood Forest was first settled by Vikings, another band of famous villains. And at last, after 10 years of painstaking research, archaeologists have traced the site of a famous Viking meeting place.
Sounds amazing, but how do we find it?
I've no idea, but let's find someone who does.
Hello!
Hi there, you alright?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Howdy.
Hi Andy, I'm Kate.
Hi.
Where are you taking us then?
Well, I'm going to drive you up into the woods, into Berklands, to the top of the hill called Hanger Hill, to a place that was known as Thynghowe in Viking times. It's a meeting site, a Viking meeting site.
Sounds incredible. Should we go for it?
Okay.
So tell us a little bit about what you've been doing then, Andy, up here.
We've been working with a local group called the Friends of Thynghowe, which are named after the site itself. They're a voluntary group, and we've been doing archaeological fieldwork and archaeological investigations, historical investigations, up at this site. They've been doing it for well over a decade now. We as Martyn have been doing it for the last 5-6 years. But it takes a long time to prove something. The place name is the strongest indicator of the site, but we have to do the archaeology, and that takes many years to build up the level of information.
So a place name can tell you if there was Viking presence?
Yeah, lots of the villages in this part of the world, and in Thorpe or in BY, such as Budby, where we've just come from, Gleedthorpe, where we are as well. These are Viking or Scandinavian place name endings, and they indicate that there were Viking settlers up in these parts.
Martyn, when did the Vikings first come to Nottingham?
Well, they first appeared to have arrived in 868 when Halfdan Ragnarsson and Ivar the Boneless led the great army, or the great heathen army, down to Nottinghamshire.
Ivar the Boneless, what a name.
Well, it's a great name. I mean, they're sons of the legendary Ragnar Hairy-Breeks, and they're revenging their father's death by taking over huge parts of Saxon England.
Love it. So we're here then. Now, if you didn't know this was here, you could easily walk past this, couldn't you? What are we actually looking for right now?
Well, it's the fact that it's not easy to see has been why it's been so difficult to find archaeologically. We're actually looking for, there's a mound at the top of the hill, and then there's actually some little bits of archaeology on the ground that are quite ephemeral and quite difficult to see. I'm going to go and try and show you those.
And what makes it an actual Viking site then?
Well, probably the most obvious indicator is the name, the place name. Place names are very useful. The Thing part of the place name, Thynghowe, means meeting site, and the hill part, the How part, means hill. So we've got a hill of assembly, a hill of a meeting place.
So Vikings would have met right here?
That's right, yeah. Well, they would have possibly done pronounced their laws from the top of the hill, which is up that way, which we're going to in a minute, which was the mound itself, where the parish boundaries all meet up there for later times. What we're actually stood on just here is probably part of the site, and it's a very exciting part of the site potentially, although it doesn't look like much. But this, what we're stood on, just down here, where there's the brown soil emerging through the leaves on the ground, is actually a bank running round, and it curves round off that way, and we're still on top of it. If I step back just slightly, you can see that I'm lower than you now. Yeah. I'm not crouching, I am genuinely lower, and I'm in a ditch, and there's a ditch that runs round following the bank. This is a very strange feature, and it's 75 metres across, it runs all the way around in a circle, and it cuts right into the top of the Thynghowe mound up there.
And what does that mean then? What is that proving?
Well, it could be the circular area that they held their meetings in. In the sagas, the Icelandic sagas, they refer to court circles that they met in, and they would hold their court in the circle, And when they decided what they would proclaim, they'd proclaim it from the mound. It's a theory and it's being worked on, but at the moment, the dating, it does seem to be fitting in with it. If it is the court circle, it would be the only one that survives.
In the world?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's incredible.
There might be a couple, I don't think there are. So it'll be very exciting.
And which is why you're here with your team working away and doing surveys today?
Yes, we're currently over the far side, we're setting up to do a resistance survey. So we're going to do, it's geophysical survey. It will enable us to see into the ground. We've done different kinds of geophysics, of different techniques. One that looks at magnetics, and we've detected features out here. This one's going to put an electrical current into the floor and show us, hopefully, ditches, features, maybe even structures in the floor. So that's what we're just setting out at the moment.
Should we go have a look?
Yep.
Definitely feels like we're getting to the high point now.
Yeah, we're at the top of the hill now.
So tell us, Andy, what is important about this hill?
Well, this is a point in the landscape. This is Thynghowe, basically.
So this right here is Thynghowe.
We're on top of the hill now, on top of the mound. Right now, it's one of the few places where you can stand on top of a thing and know you're on a thing. We know where the thing is, for want of a better term, because it's where three parishes meet. That circle that we started off at has gone all the way around through this now beech woodland down here, and it actually cuts up against the parish boundary there and against the parish boundary on that side, and this is it here, right up at the top of the hill. But it's very difficult to see this stuff. It wasn't known that this was here. It's taken years of surveying, LiDAR surveys, geophysical surveys, and then proving through excavation to actually find these very ephemeral features and start to think about them as a possible landscape.
Do you mind if we go and have a chat to some of the guys now to find out what they're doing?
I think you should definitely do that.
Brilliant. I've spotted a very cute dog. Is this the mascot for today?
Oh, she just comes along sometimes.
And so you're part of Friends of Thynghowe, aren't you?
Yeah, I've been a member for, well over 10 years now.
How did that all start?
Well, the whole Thynghowe project started when Stuart and Linda found a document in a sale in the West Country, and when they inspected it, they discovered that it was a perambulation of the local parish, Warsop. And it mentioned, in the part where they walked past this hill, that according to ancient custom, they stopped on the hill and the folks from Warsop consumed bread and cheese and ale. And investigating that legend really led to the discovery of all this special archaeology up here and the whole story about how the Viking settlers would have had meetings up on this hill.
And so just from that one piece of paper?
That one ancient document, 200 years old.
So what sort of activities take place on this site then?
Every year we have a perambulation walk to the hill where a group of people walk through the woods. We talk about the historic sites along the way, and when we get to the hill we have a thing assembly where we all shout in agreement to the declarations of the law speaker on the hill.
Do you get in your Viking clothes?
Not quite that far yet, but last year we had a celebration of the tradition of consuming bread and cheese and ale on the hill to mark 200 years since the original perambulation.
Sounds like my kind of party.
Yeah.
So essentially you're keeping the history of this place alive. It's a sort of living history.
Yes, well, it's the ancient tradition of assembling on the hill, and we're trying to keep that tradition going. So every year we're up here marking not only the anniversary of the perambulation, but also the tradition of the Vikings assembling on the hill.
Well, I think Tango definitely likes it here, don't you, Tango? Simon, as a Viking enthusiast, what's it like to be here at the Thynghowe site, working on surveys that are happening right this day?
Well, frankly, it's an utter thrill. I've wanted to come here for a while. It's incredibly difficult to find this location, and so just to be here and be part of this day and this survey is, as I say, it's an utter thrill.
And so, when did the Vikings actually come over to Nottingham, and how?
They came to the British Isles in 793 when they raided the monastery in Lindisfarne, and then they of course went back. They had many a raid on the northeast coast, and perhaps trying to figure out the best way to invade in the future. But as I say, then in 856 they came over, took York, then a couple of years later worked their way down into Nottingham where they overwintered.
Can you tell us something about the significance of Danelaw and the 5 boroughs?
Indeed. Well, after the Treaty of Wedmore, the country was kind of split, and there was of course, Wessex and then East Mercia. Within Mercia, we had the 5 boroughs, the 5 quite significant places in the Viking Age, specifically in the British Isles. They were Derby, Lincoln, Leicester, Stamford, and of course here in Nottingham.
And what do you think they would have been doing at this point here?
Well, at this point specifically, we know this is the old Norse word thing. It's like kind of a meeting point, a meeting place. So an area such as this would have been used to create laws and general day-to-day politics, I would say, where they would meet and, figure out precisely what they were going to do, whether that be, as I say, politically or perhaps figure out where to raid next.
Almost like the Parliament.
Well, yes, precisely.
Do you feel like people realise that the legacy that Vikings left?
Well, yeah, I think people pass things every day where they might not even realise. Place names, for example, such as anything with a thorp, which means settlement in Old Norse. So Gunthorpe, Billsthorpe, places like that, just locally here. I believe there's Clipston as well, which was an Old Norse name, Clipper, which is pronunciation is probably terrible on that, but Clipper's Farm, I believe that was. And not only that, I think the integration that the Vikings had throughout the entire British Isles, but then specifically here in the East Midlands and in the north, it was a melting pot of 2 different languages that infiltrated the English language that we know today.
Well, Kate, it's marvellous that we're still finding out so many important things about the Vikings several centuries after they were here.
Well, when we come back, we're looking at some of the most incredible Viking finds ever discovered. Don't go anywhere. Hello and welcome back. Today we're taking you back in time to when Nottinghamshire was ruled by another band of outlaws.
It's the golden age of the Vikings.
Well, so far we've discovered that Nottinghamshire was invaded by Vikings back in 868. But Martyn, apparently they're back in town again.
They are. Here at Lakeside they've assembled an internationally credited collection of artefacts from the golden age of the Vikings.
Sounds very snazzy. Should we go take a look?
Yeah, let's do so.
Wow, Roderick, this is incredible. Hello.
Hiya.
You must be like a kid in a candy shop in here.
Totally. I mean, this is fantastic. I mean, it tells us a full story of the Vikings way beyond the warrior archetypes that you'd normally see. For example, I mean, the axe. Everybody associates Vikings with axes. And the silver neck ring, the silver arm ring. Essentially, this is what people think about with Vikings, and the exhibition brings us in looking at them, but it changes our perspective as we move through.
When you picture a Viking, you do picture them with kind of like an axe in hand, don't you?
You do, absolutely. I think probably it's the most common stereotype about Viking men is big axes, blood everywhere, and loads of bling.
I was going to say, and yet they rep the bling at the same time.
Totally. They wore the guy liner, they wore eye makeup.
Did they actually?
Yes, they did.
That's incredible.
And they looked after their hair. Combs were massively important, They wanted to actually look their best. And there's one 11th century chronicler tells us that, in fact, the Vikings were so hated because the Anglo-Saxon women loved them because they bathed at least once a week.
Love that. Love that. That's more than you, Martyn.
Yeah. So what else have we got in this cabinet, Roderick?
This here is the bottom of a sword sheath. It's a chape, highly decorated. Everything was highly decorated. The Vikings loved decoration.
My views of Vikings are already changing from these kind of rough, burly men to people that care about their appearance and wear makeup and jewellery.
Oh, yeah, totally. They loved looking after their appearance. Yes, they were rough, burly men, but they were sensitive. They went home and wrote poetry too.
Oh, can we have a look at a few more pieces?
Certainly.
Something glistening in the spotlight over here. This looks incredible.
This is a Viking grave marker, and this person who's buried here obviously wanted to be remembered for being a warrior, hence the sword, and presumably for taking captives and slaves.
Is it just me, or is the sword bigger than the person here?
The sword is bigger than the person.
That says a lot, doesn't it?
I think it says a lot about this Viking.
Well, I can't put it off any longer. I've spotted the gem in the exhibition. this is the kind of finale piece almost, isn't it?
This is one of my favourite pieces in this exhibition. This is the York helmet, also known as the Coppergate helmet, and it was found in 1982 in Coppergate in York. And this digger driver suddenly hit something hard in the ground. It was a wood-lined pit with this helmet in it.
No way.
Bone and antler and things like that. It has the name of the owner of the helmet on it, Osherra, which either means warrior of the House of Os or it's a personal name.
I think it's interesting as well, the names that they give themselves, they're not your average name, are they? They're like kind of incredible warrior names.
Oh, they are. There's a lot of animal names, people taking names like wolf because they want to have the power and strength of the wolf, and the Vikings themselves would have Ulf and Björn, Björn is bear, are the two most common Viking names.
And if you're a wolf or a bear, you're going to have a pretty cool sword as well.
Oh yeah, this sword is fantastic. You were wondering about how people might have shown their strength and power and wealth. Here we have silver gilt decoration on the sword. This is the Vikings once more, not only being dandies, but also flaunting their wealth in the best possible way. And fun thing is, it was found by a 9-year-old boy in a beck in North Yorkshire.
No way.
I absolutely imagine him finding it and immediately waving it around. He imagined the excitement of finding that. It's absolutely fantastic. And again, this is from the 9th century, so this is the middle of the Viking Age as well. So whoever owned this sword may well have been a Viking or fought the Vikings, but they would have been somebody rich and powerful.
I bet.
So far, I think what we've seen is things that are typical of people's impressions of the Vikings. And yet I understand in the exhibition there's a lot more that shows us the broader roles within Viking society, including those taken by women.
Does that mean that you're going to start putting on women's clothes, Martyn?
No, it doesn't.
Hello, Judith. Lovely to meet you. I'm Kate.
Hello, Kate.
Loving the purple gloves. Thank you ever so much for putting these out on display for us. Can you talk us through some of these things?
Well, what we have is two different types of objects. We've got reproductions of objects so that you can see what they looked like originally when they were first made in the Viking Age, and then we have some real objects that we can handle as well.
Well, I am instantly drawn to the shiny things. I'm not going to lie, Judith. Of course. Are you still struggling with your gloves? Come on, Martyn, keep up.
Well, I'll start with the jewellery since you like shiny things. These are all objects found either in Nottinghamshire or Lincolnshire, mostly by metal detectorists. I'll start with this little one. It's found in Nottinghamshire. It's called a trefoil brooch. It's a sort of three-sided brooch, and it's the kind of thing that's worn by women. They would have a linen underdress, and this would hold it together at the neck. Wow. And these are important because there's quite a lot of this kind of stuff has been found throughout the Danelaw, and they show that there were women here, people wearing Viking-style clothing held together with Viking-style jewellery. It's
easy to forget, I know it sounds silly, but there were female Vikings and they had a huge role in this period.
Absolutely. We have place names in this region, and the only reason we would have place names in the Old Norse language is if people are speaking the Old Norse language, and the only reason people kept speaking the Old Norse language is because there would be families where both the father, the mother, the children all spoke Old Norse.
I'm intrigued by what this is.
This is a secret little thing that you can just take with you when you're a traveling merchant, and it opens up as a set of scales.
Wow.
So if you knew, here's a weight found in Nottinghamshire, if you knew you needed that amount, this is 20 grams, if you needed that amount of silver to pay for something, you put that in one end, and then you kept putting in the silver until it sort of balanced out. And then you had the right amount of silver to pay for your cow or whatever it was you were buying.
And another thing that hasn't been improved upon is the item there, the comb.
But this one is rather special because it has an inscription on it in runes. The runic alphabet is alphabet used by the Vikings, and the inscription says, "Thorfast made a good comb." So it raises all kinds of interesting questions. This could have easily have been imported from Scandinavia, as you say, but was there a person in Lincoln called Thorfast who was making combs? And it's interesting that in a place like York, which we assume is a very Viking place, we haven't found any runic inscriptions, but we have at least 3 from Lincolnshire.
And so from the shiny things to the more, well, the real things.
The real things, yes.
I mean, this item looks like a bone, doesn't it? But it is more than that, isn't it?
Well, it is a bone. It's a bone from a horse. And if you look at the bottom, you can see it's been flattened. It's an ice skate. And there quite a few of these have been found in York in particular. And I suppose, well, you know, the climate was a bit colder in those days. The Scandinavians were very familiar with winter and ice and snow. They probably amused themselves by skating up and down the frozen rivers.
So they could have been tazzing up and down the River Trent?
Probably, I think so, almost certainly.
That's brilliant. We should give it a go, Martyn.
Yes, I'll let you try it first.
All of this, though, it shows a different side to the Vikings that maybe people don't necessarily always think about.
No, well, one of the effects of the Viking raids is that they were followed by immigration. So people came, some of the warriors stayed behind, some of them brought their families over, and new families came over, and they settled very extensively throughout the East Midlands and basically settled down to a life of farming. But in towns like Lincoln and York and Nottingham, they also would then work on crafts and trade, which is what a lot of this represents.
I think what's interesting that you say is that still so much being researched now and found still.
Yes, well, a lot of these are very recent finds. There's archaeological excavations at Torksey. The city of Nottingham was excavated in the 1970s, and we're still waiting for the publication of that, but that was an important Viking centre as well, so we look forward to finding out more about it in the near future.
The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, 868. In this year, the same army went into Mercia to Nottingham and took up winter quarters there. And Burgred, king of the Mercians, and his councillors asked Ethelred, king of the West Saxons, and his brother Alfred to help him to fight against the army. They then went with the army, the West Saxons, into Mercia to Nottingham, and came upon the enemy in that fortress and besieged them there. There occurred no serious battle there, and the Mercians made peace with the enemy. 1066 is synonymous with the Battle of Hastings, but just a month before then, the 25th of October, there was a battle at Stamford Bridge where Harold defeated the Vikings. Of course, he'd have been slightly exhausted and his troops depleted, and then when he got word of the Normans conquering in Kent, in Hastings, they then set foot down there, and then of course Harold was defeated. So intriguingly, William the Conqueror, we know, who invaded, he was a Viking descendant. So it's quite ironic the fact that even though the Vikings were defeated effectively in 1066, it was still a Viking victory.
You know what, Martyn? I feel a bit sorry for Ivor the Boneless and the rest of the Viking clan, because all right, they made a few questionable decisions over time, but they're not as bad as they've been made out to be, are they?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't like to bump into them on a dark night, but it is undeniable. They made an immense cultural and political contribution to the history of Britain and Ireland.
You remind me a bit of a Viking, actually.
Do I?
Yeah.
Oh, that's quite cool, isn't it?
I reckon you could rock the guy liner and the bling.
Well, I'd like the helmet with the horns on. Really do it for me.
Well, that's all we've got time for today, guys. Join us next time as we peer into another part of Nottinghamshire history.